have to have, market pull, right? So what we had essentially done at that phase was we had created a prototype, right? And we didn't really have a plan other than we had a prototype for something that we thought was solving a problem. And using 3D printing, it was relatively inexpensive to get to that prototype. So then we took the prototype, and that's when we did some of the customer discovery. We went to a conference, we showed it to a few people, what do you think? And there was one particular company, they took our product, I remember it like it was yesterday, they held it to their chest, and they said, please don't show this to anybody else.
Life that I'm living. Sit back, chillin', start a multi-business with the focus of making millions. It's the stuff that dreams are made of and no. Everyone, thank you for joining us for another episode of Let's Talk Business. I'm your host, Marvell Robinson, and today we are focusing on some of the resources that entrepreneurs can have right here in the local community of South Bend and Mishawaka. Today we have a special guest with us. You may know him, you may not, but if you don't, you're going to learn who he is today. Who am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about Mr. Matthew Leevy. How you doing, man?
Great, thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thank you first of all for taking the time out. I know when we first connected and talked about it, you went on a vacation and we had to make some adjustments. I hope you had a good time on that vacation, and I'm glad you're here today.
Yes, I appreciate that very much so, and very happy to be here. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Matthew, let's talk a little bit about you and your background. Where are you from, and what schools did you attend?
Well, I am a Midwesterner, so I'm from Central Illinois. I went to the University of Illinois as an undergrad, did bioengineering there, and then went and did a PhD in biophysics, of all the things. Like, who does that? But I did, and I went and did that at a place called Washington University, but that is located in St. Louis. Came up to Notre Dame to do a postdoc, so I was like a biology professor, a biology researcher. Did that for 10 years at Notre Dame. My research lab got into 3D printing. Next thing you know, we're in this entrepreneurship and innovation space. And we were asked to build out an innovation lab, and that's the resource that I'm so thrilled to be here to talk to you today about.
Okay, absolutely. So you've been through a little bit of a process journey that led you right here to South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah, all the way to Let's Talk Business.
Yeah, let's talk business then. Yeah, absolutely. Matthew, when I first met you, you're a very strong supporter of entrepreneurship, no doubt, because
Absolutely.
you was at the Women's Entrepreneurship Conference.
Yes.
And that's where I first had the opportunity to hear you give a presentation, and you were sharing some of the resources that are out here to help up and coming entrepreneurs on their business journey. Talk a little bit about that for us.
What I think is great about this community, this county, and even this region, you might say, is that we have a number of resources that are available for entrepreneurs. We've got the South Bend Elkhart Regional Partnership, and a part of that, Startup South Bend Elkhart. We've got a number of different programs that entrepreneurs can participate in, and one of those is at Notre Dame with KEO. That's the South Bend Entrepreneurship and Adversity Program. And they graduate about 50 folks per year, and as part of that program, we help a lot of those individuals with some of their small business needs. So my lab, which is called the Innovation Lab, we're great at building things. We're great at making things. That's our superpower, right? And it is so often the case that an entrepreneur, especially if they're starting out, they might need a product designed and built for them. Happy to do that. We love doing products. But also, they might need a sign built. They might need some vinyl put in the window to make their shop, kick a little bit more, right? So we do a lot of those types of activities on behalf of local inventors and local entrepreneurs to help them on their journey to be a successful business operator.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Some people might not even be aware in our community that those are things that they have access to. So thank you for sharing that. So when you think about where we are when it comes to this fourth wave of entrepreneurship, and you just mentioned all the resources and the things that's going on, for you yourself have been bit by that bug as an entrepreneur, a business owner yourself. Talk to us a little bit about your own company.
Sure. So, you go back 7 years, actually go back 10 years. I was a biology professor in the Department of Biology there at Notre Dame, and that's when this new technology started to really take root. New to us anyways, called 3D printing, and that's when you saw a lot of these consumer grade machines hitting the market that where for $500, for $1,000, you are now empowered to make your own plastic products, right? And what a powerful thing that is, right? To be able to, and at the same time, the design tools were starting to come out and be accessible to people, whether it's Google SketchUp or some of these other software packages. So now, so many, I think what's fascinating about physical product entrepreneurship, we all live in the physical world.
Right.
We all experience the physical world. And I think many of us, as we go throughout life, we encounter problems and we say, man, I could do that better with a physical product. I could make a better mousetrap. I could make a better fill in the blank. And that's sort of where we operate, is trying to innovate some of these physical products and bring them to market. So in my case, I was working in a research lab, and we were doing anesthesia delivery to small animals. And it was done in a way that was very unsafe. The waste gas was leaking in the faces of the researchers and the people that are doing these procedures. And you can't have that, especially for females, because it might lead to birth defects. Okay, so we 3D printed. So we used the new technology, designed and 3D printed, and this was a collaboration with a talented designer that was in my lab named Tony Van Avermaet, a shout out to him. But we just made a better nose cone to do that. It scavenges the waste gas, it's much safer. And I would say that we probably helped, we're now 10 years into that business, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 researchers per year that use our products in laboratories around the world and have a safer lab environment for that.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. So safety conscious, I love that, I love that. And you gotta be that way when you're dealing with products anyway, because you know, there's chemicals involved, especially with these 3D printers. You know, CAD was the thing before, but that seems to be, is that becoming replaced with this new technology?
I think you would still use that term, right?
Okay.
And there's still AutoCAD, and there's software packages that do the 3D design. Yeah,
Gotcha.
SolidWorks, Inventor, Onshape. So
yeah, absolutely. And I know a buddy of mine who's into that, exactly that space that you mentioned. Now, when you think about your experience and you know, being very conscious of what you mentioned there about being safety for that, what motivated you to say, I want to start my own business? Was it from that experience, or did you just, what was the trigger for you?
Well, you know what I think is neat about that question? I think so many of the entrepreneurial students that we interact with, so many of the people in the community that I interact with that are entrepreneurs, they share stories back from childhood, back from being in high school, where they say, you know, I should have known I was an entrepreneur back then. Like, I was going to Sam's Club and I'd buy a case of Snickers bars for 50 cents each, and I'd take them to school and I'd sell them for $1 each, right? Like, that is a form of entrepreneurship, to be sure.
Yeah.
And so when you get down the road and you start doing some of these business concepts and forming businesses, you realize that the roots were there long before. And for us, I think that, yes, that just sort of, you know, once we were empowered with the technology to build some neat new things and fundamentally solve problems, that we just kind of knew, okay, like we want to start a company with this. Now we also had some serendipity. Everybody is going to have a moment where they feel like they kind of got lucky when they start a company, right?
Okay.
And for us, we were at a conference. We showed some of our first products to a company that might buy them and resell them, right? And they loved it, and they placed an order on the spot, which is something we weren't expecting. So yes, like that was really what was the turning point for starting that particular company. And I think what's important for us is, like, I would say we have leveraged enterprise. We have leveraged capitalism in a certain sense to have impact in the world. So as a biology professor, you would typically publish a lot of your results and share those with the world. If we had done that, some people would have read that, maybe cited it, but not very many people would have taken the files and 3D printed them and used them themselves. When you have something that is commercially viable, what I think is neat is that you get these other companies that are motivated to sell it, motivated to advertise it, market it, distribute it. And that really strengthened the impact of that particular technology we developed. So sometimes I think that's what we would be talking about at Notre Dame is how do you leverage enterprise to have positive impact in the world?
Yeah, I love that. Because it sounds like to me, which I've encouraged other people, and it's been encouraged here on the show by Anj Agasaro.
Oh, yeah.
She mentioned about how you have to go out into the world, so to speak, and see if people will make the purchase from you, right? So in other words, proof of concept, will it sell? And if people go in their pockets and they pay you for it, now that's a sense of motivation that I have something here, that people see value and that they're willing to pay for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that. And it's amazing how that was a shocker to you guys, because it came out of nowhere. It was totally unexpected, but yet people saw it, saw value, and wanted it. So that just skyrockets you guys to moving forward, huh?
Absolutely, yes.
Wow. So that's without the whole idea of a business plan and doing any of the initial things that most companies do.
Yeah.
You did that without even have to go through all that.
I mean, that's true. So we, back to, what Anj was saying was like, you have to have, market pull, right? So what we had essentially done at that phase was we had created a prototype, right? And we didn't really have a plan other than we had a prototype for something that we thought was solving a problem. And using 3D printing, it was relatively inexpensive to get to that prototype. So then we took the prototype, and that's when we did some of the customer discovery. We went to a conference, we showed it to a few people, what do you think? And there was one particular company, they took our product, I remember it like it was yesterday, they held it to their chest and they said, please don't show this to anybody else.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was our market signal. And then of course they placed an order, and that unlocked the resources for us to really go through a lot of the planning, the business launch, the business formation, and finalizing the product designs so that we could actually commercialize it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So that journey in itself, just that was the startup capital for you guys. I mean, did you guys, after you make that, to meet that the needs of that client at that time, this was obviously some did you sell it like right then and there? Did you have enough product to give them? Was there orders? You said they took orders, so how did you fill the orders?
Yeah, and I want to be very, full transparency. That is a success that we've had. We have plenty of failures, okay? I've started a few other things that have not worked. So that's full disclosure. That's entrepreneurship for you.
Yeah.
I had a couple other little wins, but this was one of our first things that got us really rolling. But for this particular story, we showed them the product and they said, we want to buy it. We stayed in communication and we got our business formed and kind of got a lot of our ducks in a row on that. Then they gave us a purchase order for the product. And then they actually gave us 50% down. And that 50% as the down payment was critical for us because we used that to really, at the time we were scavenging 99% of waste gas. We had to scavenge 99.99%. And it took a lot of we spent all of that down payment basically to finalize. But we did get it finalized and we delivered the first wave, and our customers have been very happy ever since.
Okay. So when I hear you say all these things, it sounds like distribution in there, you're dealing with these orders, this is some software, it's a lot of pieces. Who helped you to get to this? Who were the supporting cast that helped you accomplish this goal?
Okay, that's a wonderful question. All right. So here's how I would describe this, knowing what I know today.
Yeah.
All right, so when you start and you're by yourself, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know a lot of the critical things that you need to do, and you have to learn it, and you can learn it. That's what's beautiful about entrepreneurship. Anybody can jump in the game and start learning it. It's like a little bit of a puzzle. You start discovering these pieces, and pretty soon they start clicking together, and next thing you know, you can see the picture.
Right.
Sometimes you like the picture, sometimes you don't, but at least you can see what the picture is. So I had a team there were 4 of us that launched that company, okay? Certain people were doing products, certain people were doing leadership, certain people were doing, manufacturing and fulfillment. We all had roles within that little company. So that's what that's what we recommend to anybody doing a physical product company is there are up to 4 different roles that you might have. So one role would be housing both sales and business development. Those are a little bit different,
Right.
okay? Another role is going to be doing product development and product management. So those are like the research and development, right? R&D, that's a different role. It feels different, right?
Right.
You're going to have some folks that are doing the production and fulfillment, and then you're going to have other people that are just taking care of the admin, the finance, the accounting, filing all the paperwork, doing compliance. And then you have there's a leadership role that's also there as well.
Yeah.
So those are the things, if you can be mindful of, like, okay, who's doing the selling? If you're selling on Etsy, okay, fine. Etsy is taking care of that role, right? But like sometimes you're selling door to door, sometimes you're selling retail, sometimes you're selling on Amazon. It's very different types of selling. Sometimes you're selling through a distributor, which is what we do. So, you know, but just I always recommend write down each of those pieces and then say, who's gonna do that? And it's almost impossible for one person to do everything.
Yeah.
It's really difficult.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because what you have just given the audience, no doubt, for those in the particular industry that deals with products, you got to know your industry, and you certainly need to know the roles everybody's playing. And I like how you acknowledge that it is impossible with the weights of each responsibility for one person to carry. So that means you have to delegate. You can't be a perfectionist and think that you're going to do everything. You have to be willing to trust the people that you delegate to, let them perform those tasks, and let the results be what they're going to be. And I really appreciate the fact that you really are bringing to the attention of the importance of having a supporting cast. So people need to really think about, when they're starting these businesses, you know, when you think about the longevity of a company, you need to think about how you're going to structure your business. You need to really have that in mind before you even probably go into getting it registered with the state. You know, if you want to do it before then, okay, fine. I just, from what I've gathered here, is the importance of knowing your business and being able to structure it in a way for the business to succeed. Now, what I wanted to ask you, when I think about these products again, something that I know some people have struggles with sometime, and it sounds like you had a new product that you brought to the market. It sounds like that. How do you go about pricing? Because you have to, normally they try to compare it to some other item that's similar to. How did you guys go about a good market value price for your product?
Yeah, pricing is hard. I think the first thing I would say is, just as a general rule of thumb, if you're gonna produce something for X, the materials and the labor get you to X, you have got to sell at a minimum of 3X if you're gonna be successful, okay? So if you're making something for $5, you have to sell it for 15. There's just no doubt in my mind. Because by the time you pay for all the other back-end expenses, you're going to lose a third. It just is the way of the world. So minimum of triple, and anytime you can do better than that, you're starting to feel better and better about the business, okay? So that's like just the general rule of thumb for me and for what I've observed within the physical product space. Sometimes you can do way better than 3X and you feel great about it, right? Especially if you've developed some technology, maybe there's some IP. But in general, 3X is that baseline. And so often it is the case that folks, you know, whenever you go below 3X, that's when you have this so-called unit economics problem. You're not making enough on the sales of each unit to really cover all of the costs.
Yeah.
So it's not just the cost of production. You've got to ship things.
Yeah.
You've got your own time in managing it. You've got so many other costs that get put into that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because the reality of it is, especially in the world of business, we're combating the situation where things are constantly changing. You got the inflations, you know, then we got the tariff thing going on, and people are kind of terrified with, because it's, you know, what does the cost look like, right? So, you know, that was a good point you made. So you always have to think in those terms, especially if you want a return on your investment. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Scary times, but also a mandatory thing that if you're a business owner, you have to consider these things. Man, thank you so much for bringing that up. That was a good point. Now, when you think about where we are in this fourth wave of the world of entrepreneurship, this thing is just blowing up so much. And you mentioned something earlier about failure. And you said you failed many times before you got that opportunity of success. How were you able to continue to keep moving forward after failure after failure after failure until you got to that moment of success? What was the motivating factor for you?
Yep, another excellent question. And the short answer is, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to understand that 85% of businesses fail. Okay, so that's basically 1 out of 6 is going to succeed. All right, I encounter so many people that have invented a widget, a thing, and they are seduced by it. Right, and I've been there too. Seduced by your own invention, you love it because you've made it. You've brought this thing into the world. You've given birth to it. And yet, if you don't do that customer discovery we talked about earlier, so many people, and one of the major reasons that businesses fail is they launch a product into the market for which the market doesn't actually have a problem. Okay? So you have to, if you can emotionally uncouple, right? And you know, hey, look, I might have to do 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 to get one that hits. Then we change the conversation. It's all about, okay, I have an idea. How do I know if this thing is going to sink or swim as quickly as possible so I don't waste my time on it, right? So we call that failing fast. So it's a game of failing fast and really getting enough information to make a go, no-go decision on it. So that's really, I think, the name of the game with entrepreneurship.
Wow, good point. Thank you for breaking that down like that, because it's so true. I mean, those numbers, and that's the world we live in, especially, like I said, this is that fourth wave, and everybody's trying to find a way to get into the ranks of entrepreneurship. And again, even with that mindset, what you mentioned there, I'm sure you're familiar with Robert Kiyosaki, no doubt, right?
No, but educate me.
Oh, wow, the first. Well, anyway, Robert Kiyosaki came out with the quadrant. And the quadrant talks about the one side deals with being a employee, a small business owner. Then it talks about having systems, and then it talks about being an investor, right? So on this quadrant, you know, we've all been there. We most likely start off as employees. Then we go into the transition into being a self-employed, where you're actually, some people say you're owning a business or operator of a business. I'm hearing that lately. With the intentions to crossing over to the other side, where now you have a system, where you're now a owner, a legit owner of the business, where you can sleep and the business can move and function without you, right? But then you got to the main area of being an investor, where now you just have the luxury to invest. I bring that point up because, tell me if you agree, and if there's more to it, please add. When it comes to this world entrepreneurship, we know that means a person who takes on risk. You got to go into it knowing there are tons of risk, and like you mentioned, failure is part of the process, so you can't give up. Entrepreneurship is a process that leads to a mindset of business ownership. What's your take on that statement?
You know, I would, even going back to what you were just saying, I would note, interesting about, like, one interesting thing about entrepreneurs, if you look at like the background of a successful entrepreneur, you kind of touched on a couple points, which is they have actually a previous fail, but they almost all have universally worked for a company before having their first success. And I think a reason for that, as you talk about de-risking some of those early businesses, is you got to have, like, they so often start as a side hustle, if you will, or something on the side. So, you know, we can't just all dive into something and not earn money, because we have to live our lives, right? So, and we see that with a lot of our students. They will graduate, go into the world, pay down student loans, and then when they get into their 30s is when they can start to take some actual real risk. Okay? But in terms of the pathway to, you know, from being employee to then maybe business operator to then like an independent owner the business can operate, that's a part of the journey. I think that a lot of people want to be on that path, but I will also, like, there's a new piece of information I learned recently that it's only 1 out of every 200 businesses that get to $1 million in revenue every year. It's 1 in 200 or even a little bit less than that. Okay, so 1 in 200. Now, if you have a company that makes $500,000 a year, and you can net 20% on that, that's 100K, that's a good life, right? So many small businesses are falling into that category, and it's a great place to be because you can earn a living and you can do it your own way.
Right.
But we so often do get, I think, when we think about entrepreneurship, we think about the unicorns and the big things that we hear about, whereas there are many things that you can do even at this local level that I think are important. They are opportunities that people can leverage, and I've seen people have a lot of success in very different spaces based on who we've supported in the community.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I thank you again. Those numbers matter. Numbers certainly do matter. And Matthew, it's been such a great opportunity to sit here with you and to hear your experiences and how you've been able to help future generations as a professor, but also with the resources that are offered to them. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show to introduce it to those who didn't know. So I want to thank you for that.
My great pleasure to be here, and next time I plan to wear a suit jacket.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, since that's the case, do me a favor, look in that camera and you tell the audience how they can get in contact with you for the resources that are offered. Again, if you could do that.
Yeah, sure thing. So you can just find us online. We're innovationlab.nd.edu. Or you can find us on Instagram. We are at innovationlabnd.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. So with that being said, we want to thank everybody for allowing us to take some of your time throughout this day. We're glad that Matthew was able to come and share some great gems, as we can call them, so that you future entrepreneurs developing into the mindset of business ownership can continue to develop as you grow, face the many risks that you're going to face, be willing not to give up and continue on in your journey. And we're just so glad that we've been able to bring so many persons here that can share their experiences, the ups, the downs, the mentorships, their motivations, and things that encourage them. So I want to encourage you to keep moving forward and to develop the mindset of a boss. You all take care and have a wonderful day, all right?
Every day I'm hustling, 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 hustling.